zoning.
So Veronica, is that big enough? You need a,
You're not gonna be.
yeah.
Okay. I'd like to bring to order the Commission on Equity meeting, Monday, September 23rd, 5:30. I just want to announce that if you want to make public comment, there's a sign up sheet on the desk over there. We're going to do a roll call. Here, Vice Chair Kim Sauer. What do you have to say here? Say here. Commissioner Cliff Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Makita Hart,
I'm here.
on remote. Commissioner John Edgewood,
Also here.
Commissioner Thelma Jackson here, Commissioner Christine Stolberg.
I'm here.
And I know that our new Lacey Youth Council member is not here, is sick today. I'd like to ask Commissioner Jackson to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair Clay. We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian tribe and Squaxin Island tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who still live here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you. Next agenda item is to approve the amended agenda due to the removal of the introduction to the youth council member. The agenda today, the previous meeting minutes and the consent items. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the amended agenda, previous meeting minutes and consent items.
I second.
Second, it's been moved and seconded. Any additions, corrections to the minutes? Right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
We can get the commissioners online.
Like to have a vote on.
Sorry.
Can the commissioners on the Zoom remote, specified, yes? Yay?
Hi, good Lord, sorry, I was trying.
All right, okay. John? Christina, Stolberg, I'm taking the hand, your little hand icon as being a yes.
I already said aye. I don't think I have my hand up.
So this
Okay.
is our pointer on our side. So sorry for the confusion, Chair.
Right. Well, how about, is there any, nays? Hearing none. This, the agendas have been approved. Looks like we have no pre-registered, public comment. We did not receive any written public comment and, no one is signed up in the room. Okay. So for, next on the agenda is, usually our inspirational, item, and, this month, our inspirational item is the fact that we have, the city of Lacey has approved our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic plan. And that is a big, to inspire us and to inspire the city and the community that we are around. One of the council members at the meeting said that, they weren't certain if the Commission on Equity would stick and that if it might lose gas, but we have a full tank. We're ready to next step of implementation of this. And this is adding this into the comprehensive plan for the city. So we have our more real work to do in, measuring the progress on the issues that we've outlined, encouraging and monitoring the city and, the hiring and training policies, practices to scrub bias, discrimination out of the city policies and procedures, to bring Lacey into the era of racial, cultural, and economic equity. So I want to personally thank all the commissioners for all the work that we've done, 3.5 years, and especially, would like to, thank Shannon, Kelly Fong, Kelly, and the rest of your staff for producing this epic thing. Oh, I'll want to open it if, other commissioners would like to say anything in celebration of this.
It was a labor of love for sure.
Right.
I was going to say, I'm certainly enthused by the culmination of the inaugural 3 years of this commission. And I was moved by some of the comments last week by the city council. We know the threat has been out there to really dissipate DEIB efforts all over this country at every level. And we know that some of our counterparts in the surrounding cities and jurisdictions have struggled. So for Lacey to make it through that inaugural struggle, and to have this, I'm just really proud to be a part of this group that produced it and made it happen. The real work just begins. As hard as that was, it was easy compared to what lies ahead for this commission. And so it's very inspirational and certainly worth celebrating.
Yeah, I certainly agree and wanted to add that I think that we are somehow playing a model role compared to could be biased, but compared to city of Seattle, Tumwater or any other city, I think that we are creating a new pathway and being something that we can share, that they could learn from our experience. So I'm also think that's very proud and, you know, taking that place of being the frontier on this.
Yeah. Anyone online? Well, I did bring cookies if you want to, do you know? Celebrate, so pass them around, pass them around.
Thank you for that, Annie.
Yeah. All right, into our business items. We will do the introduction for the Lacey City Council, Youth Council member next time. We wish them well. Next up, Advisory Board Handbook update. Take it away.
Perfect. Well, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. It's good to be up here with you again. I'm going to invite our City Clerk's office to join us. They're going to be giving actually the bulk of the presentation for this business item.
I can move if all you all want to be together.
You just fine where you're at. Yep, I got a strengthened prescription. I mean, I tested.
Oh, there you go.
So really quickly, I do want to do some introductions, so I'll turn it down to the table over there. Alyssa.
Good evening. My name is Alyssa Fontaine and I'm the city clerk. I'm gonna kick it over to the deputies.
Commissioners, I'm Paul White. I'm one of the deputy city clerks.
Hello, my name is Brandy Legomina, Deputy City Clerk.
And so we're here to talk about updates that the Lacey City Council recently made to the advisory board handbook. They also made updates to their city council policy. And we've been going around to all of the other advisory boards too and doing a similar presentation. But I think you all know some of the work and some of the background that's already gone into this. So we'll go kind of an abbreviated portion for my portion of the presentation, and then I'll hand it over to the clerk's office because they're going to go over public meetings, and part of that is going to be updating your training that is required on a frequent basis, and then also going over some best tips and tricks for public meetings here moving forward. So for key takeaways we've highlighted from all of our presentations here, number one key takeaway is to communicate early and often with your staff liaisons. So we're here to help, and we want to be a valuable asset to help you all do the work that you do. And so if you can communicate any issues that you have, or, you know, for example, if you maybe aren't able to make it to a meeting, just to let us know, or if there are items that you have questions or concerns about, we're happy to chat with you on that. The second one, connected to an element of that, is that quorums are key to do the business that you all do. Without a quorum, we can't continue with our public meetings. And so there's a lot of work that goes on the back end to bring things here. You all do a lot of heavy lifting and provide us with some thoughts and ideas. But to get here, there's a lot of work that goes on, and we want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to have those conversations.
So a quorum for us is what, 4 or 5?
4. Yep. Good clarification.
Ask for clarification. We, 1 month, we didn't have a quorum. And I wanted to have an informational meeting versus a public meeting. Is that?
It's a great
okay
question, Chair. And if you will allow us 20 minutes, Alyssa's going to go over that exact scenario with you in just a second. So. The third one is just not to create any unnecessary records, public records that you don't need to. And so we'll do a refresher on public records and how you can create them and how you can think about maybe not doing that. And then finally, Robert's rules are here to help. They're helpful for organizing and structuring conversations. And so the clerks are going to provide some tips and tricks for how to use Robert's rules. So we'll take a look at the updated advisory board handbook. We'll focus on the updated public comment, public hearings, and then we'll hand it over to the clerk's office again to talk about public meetings, public records, Robert's rules, and maybe best practices. I know you all were here, you experienced this. We did provide this slide for background for the other commissions to kind of explain why we started this process. And this was really because of the vile, reprehensible, racist comments that were made at a Commission on Equity meeting. It really gave us an opportunity to take a look at, hey, what are we doing? How can we provide tools to our staff, to our advisory boards and our city council in case an incident like this happens, but also allowed us to research the subject and to understand what kind of parameters we're operating in. So I know we talked at length on these subjects before. So just in quick review, we talked about the First Amendment of the Constitution and how you can't abridge freedom of speech, how hate speech is protected by the First Amendment and it can only be criminalized when it turns into a hate crime offense. And a hate crime offense per the RCW states that words alone do not constitute a hate crime offense unless the context or the circumstances surrounding the words indicate that the words are a threat. Threatening words do not constitute a hate crime offense if it is apparent that the victim that the person does not have the ability to carry out that threat. So it's very specific on what is a hate crime offense. We talked about public comments and how public comment here is considered a limited public forum for free speech purposes. And as part of that, people have the right to their First Amendment. What governments can regulate is the time, the place, and the manner of speech, provided that those regulations are reasonable and content neutral. And here in Washington, per RCWs, you have to receive public comment at all regular meetings of a governing body where final action is taken. With the handbook updates, we went through all of this information with you all. We got a recommendation. We took it to council. Council deliberated on it over a couple of meetings. And finally, they did provide an update, which number one, streamlined the content in the advisory board handbook, making it easier to read. It also updated information so that it was current. There were references, for example, to our Board of Park Commissioners. The council had updated that name to the Parks, Culture and Recreation Board 2 years ago. So just making sure we were providing the most up-to-date information. It provided a new section, a couple of new sections, but the public comment, public hearing policies. And then it also provided new tools, which we'll go over, which are the public comment script, some helpful tools for presiding officers and advisory boards on public comment, and then also a disruption script. This went through the process, like I mentioned before, where we worked with our advisory board staff liaisons. We researched the subject. The clerks got together and did their research, and we really built off of that and then took it to the Lacey Youth Council. We also took it to you all, so I know you're familiar again. And then we took it to the council. You can see a number of times. And then finally, the council adopted the updated policy back in early August. So when we look at public comment, the key portions of public comment are that what the council adopted as part of the advisory board supersedes any rules that had been in place previously for advisory boards. And this was so that we are all comprehensive. Everybody has the same standards. And so a community member, regardless of whether they're providing public comment to the Commission on Equity or the Historical Commission or the City Council, all has the same rules and regulations that apply. So with public comment at all meetings, we will accept in-person public comment. Like the chair indicated at the very beginning of the meeting, we now have a sign-in sheet up front and individuals can sign in. That is brought to the presiding officer, presuming that somebody signs in, and then the presuming officer can determine the order in which they're going to be taking public comment. They also have the option at the end of the in-person public comment or just public comment in general to see if anybody in person would like to provide public comment in addition to those who signed in. Remote, that is not an option. You need to pre-register 2 hours in advance, and anybody who does that can provide public comment, but just raising your hand here on a virtual meeting will not allow you to provide public comment. And then similarly, with written public comment, you need to send it in 2 hours in advance of a meeting. So anybody who wants to provide you all public comment needs to do so at the COE email address by 3:30 p.m. Like I mentioned, the presiding officer determines the order, and everybody who has signed up to provide public comment gets a maximum of 3 minutes. They don't need to spend all 3 minutes, but you get 3 and you can't donate that time to anybody else. It is just your 3 minutes. And in totality, public comment can last 30 minutes. However, that can be extended by the consent of the body to increase that time, whether during that public comment period or adding an additional public comment period at the end of the meeting agenda. Anybody who provides public comment needs to provide their name, their residence and connection to the city, and then finally a brief what their topic is for public comment. And you'll see in our sign up sheets, they are to those categories specifically. And then we've got some prohibited items, which we'll take a closer look at when we look through the document itself. A couple of other things that we'll highlight through the document is that there are standards, protocols, and ground rules, and this is connected back to what I was saying here earlier. A couple I just wanted to highlight was that some of the standards in there include arriving on time, because being in a quorum and having a quorum is so key to us starting. And certainly if there are circumstances where, life happens and you're gonna be running late, going back to that communication with your staff liaison and letting them know, being prepared for meetings, and then also being prepared to accept and give constructive input and feedback. So I wanna just briefly go over where you can find all of this in the documents, the new document here.
It is on the very last slide and it's the next tab over.
There's tabs.
It's the web page. So I think if you go to the Lacey Human Services.
Perfect. Thank you for the help. And
Yes.
those, it's working.
It's
You can
working.
see from back there.
I know, I've got it. I'm so impressed.
All right, so our advisory board handbook, you can see it's got an updated look and feel. You can find this on the advisory board page, and you can see when it's was updated by the council and when it became effective, which was early in September. Some of the things we edited, like I said, was just content. So you'll see an updated forward, updated chapter 1, updated information on advisory boards, and then like I mentioned, getting current information for all of our advisory boards in the next section. We also took a look at those interpersonal standards, protocols, and ground rules. So I highlighted just a couple of them for you all today, but you can see the full list here in 1.02, where it talks about, again, arriving on time, being prepared, and being ready to engage on topics. Talks about communication protocols. And then we get into chapter 2, which is more of the kind of logistics and government regulations. So talking about Open Public Meetings Act and Public Records Act, which Alyssa is going to do a deep dive in with you all. Open government training and how you all have to do this on a regular basis. And then some communication points, information on city email addresses where they should only be used for city purposes. And again, not trying to create public records if we don't need to, how they should be used and how they should not be used. Oh, and then we'll jump down to the next section, which is on public comment. And so everything I just went over, you can find and read through. I know you all reviewed this before. There have been some updates since the council has taken a look at it, since you all looked at it last. But everything that I just went through, all of that is found right here in this section. Very similarly, and I guess before we transition to that, I do want to highlight what the prohibited items were. So the prohibited items for public comment were those that have a specified public hearing. Let me zoom in here. Electronic and physical presentations, recordings, or props, they're not allowed. Banners and signs are allowed as long as they are on the back wall and they don't impede the advisory board from doing their work. Disruptions and interruptions, including clapping, cheering, booing, interrupting speakers, candidate endorsements, they're not allowed. And the body maintains the ability to stop people from speaking to the body when they are not recognized. So the only time community members should be speaking is during public comments. You can have presenters, and that is different than during the public comment period. And then specific threats of violence targeted against a person or group with a reasonable fear of harm to person or property or sexual harassment. So similar to the public comments, we also updated our public hearing policies. There are a couple of key differences though that I did want to highlight really quickly. So the first one, everything is the same about how you can provide in-person, remote, or written public comments. The presiding officer has to open the public hearing for what the individual needs to provide. They just need to provide their name and city of residence or connection to the city, because presumably their topic is whatever is the public hearing specifically on. Testimony itself is also limited to 3 minutes, just like public comment. And that after the public comment hearing, individuals are not permitted to address the advisory board on that topic. Similarly, you've got your prohibited items. One notice that you will find here is that there is no time limit like there was with public comment. So the public hearing continues. There's no 30-minute window or duration. Everyone has the opportunity to provide that testimony and public comment. Should we skip over anything? Meeting disruptions is also a new addition here to the protocols, and it just provides what you can do per state law if there is a disruption, and specifically how you could go about adjourning the meeting if you needed to adjourn it because of disruption. And I think one of the key things that we want to highlight as part of adjourning the meeting is that you need to get consensus of this body to do so. There needs to be a vote. And it gives you all of the steps that you would need to follow after that in order to reconvene and hold your meeting. We're gonna skip through all of the various appendices of the bodies here, so hold on just a second. And we are gonna go down to the appendices at the very end, which are some of the additional tools that we provided in the handbook. So the first one in Appendix 6 is the public comment script. And this is again a tool that is now available for presiding officers to let the public know what the rules are for public comment. And specifically talking about how this is the opportunity for you all to hear from individuals. It's not a dialogue. You have 3 minutes to speak and you need to provide your name, your residence, connection to the city, and also your topic. So all of that is provided in here for the presiding officer. There's also information on if something was to go longer than 3 minutes, how to wrap up the comments. And then also if somebody doesn't provide the information necessary to start, some helpful ways to get them to provide it so that you can get that information that's required. Also, we added into the appendices notes on public comment, and this was just again to provide some more tools for advisory boards, specifically highlighting some of the research we did where the public has the right to make personal, critical, or harsh remarks, including hate speech, and that the opportunity that exists for this body is to respond to them after they occur. So allowing them their 3 minutes, as long as it doesn't go into a hate crime offense, to address those problematic comments. So as an example here, we put, the body could, after maybe something that happened with the Zoom bombing, say, the comments that were just made are deeply problematic, harmful to the community, contain hate speech, and are wholly inconsistent with our community's values. The city is committed to eradicating all forms of racism, oppression, and working to change that leads to more equitable society to all community members. And certainly that language could be tailored depending on the comments that were specifically made. In addition to that, it also provides a kind of guide for how to respond to comments where maybe the information that is provided to a body isn't specific to that body. So for example, we've got here the comments that were made contain erroneous and false information. For correct information on this topic, please see Paul. We've used the example in the past of, for example, if somebody at public comment states that Alyssa Fontaine is the city engineer, just correcting that and saying, hey, Alyssa Fontaine is not the city engineer, she's actually the city clerk. Also that members of the meeting don't have the right to disrupt it, but that mere words themselves cannot be a disruption. But if there is a disruption, you have the right to do certain elements, including adjourning the meeting, and again, providing exactly what you would need to do in those moments to adjourn the meeting. If something were to happen where you do need to adjourn the meeting, we did provide together a script here for a disruption. One thing I do want to note is that we are updating this, so it'll look a little bit different in its final form. But the first thing is just on the individual, so providing again some tools for the presiding officer to say, your time's up, please move on. We've got to continue on with public comments and or the next agenda item. Staff, could you please mute the microphones? In here, for these types of scenarios, it's very difficult, but in other circumstances, it's a much easier lift to do that. For large scale, again, we're going to have some language in here about making sure that the advisory board takes a vote, and that's what's missing from here right now to get that consensus to do this. And then after that, there'll be some language very similar to this, just saying again, what's happening, where we're going, and why we're doing it. So those are all the updates to the handbook. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. Questions that are on public records and public meetings and Robert's rules, I will let the experts handle.
Shannon, if you can go back to 1.01 in the document. It talks about advisory boards make recommendations on issues related to land use, zoning, social services, parks, library services, and historical matters. Nothing about social justice and public safety. And for us, the Equity Commission, I think a lot of our issues have fallen under the heading of social justice and public safety kinds of issues, and I did not see them. There was no et cetera, other, you know, it just stopped with that set list of issues. And I thought it left us out in what we're trying to do, social justice and public safety.
Thank you for highlighting that. That is a miss on our part, and we'll certainly put that in as future updates. You will find in the council policies and procedures that is not missing there. There does discuss equity, so I
Yes.
apologize.
Okay,
That's,
no problem. And then the section down towards the end of it, where we talk about public comments and how we, the commissioners, are to react. We're to listen but not engage in dialogue. Something along those lines. I forget exactly what it said. That's always been a concern for me. I'm not looking for dialogue. But on the one hand, we ask the public to come and communicate with us. And I've been a part of policymaking boards where citizens come and just bleed their heart. You just sit there as though you didn't hear them. Thank you for your comment. And the next comment comes up and they leave the meeting. Not a question being asked of them, not a nothing. It's okay to say, staff, will you look into that, or, you know, but the way it's stated there, what did it say? It's in the response to public comments or something. And I know it's a matter of trying to keep order and moving the agenda along. But at some point, if we want the community, especially a commission like ours, to come and share with us their issues and their concerns and ask their questions, somehow we've got to come up with a responsive language to them without getting into some dialogue. And I don't know how to state that. But 20 years on the school board, it would just hurt my heart some nights when parents would come there genuinely raising an issue to the school board. And all they got was a thanks, never heard back from us, never heard another thing from it. I would not want us as an equity commission to go down that same road. So whatever is the language, I don't know, can you give us your comments in writing or help us so we can follow up on your concern of something so they don't feel as though they came to a meeting and expressed themselves to no avail? Why come back again? And you know, folk wonder why citizens and parents don't show up at school board meetings. It's disrespectful.
yeah, Chair.
And I don't know the answer, but how we are supposed or how we are expected to respond to comments. We've got to come up with a better way. I don't have that better way to suggest, but I just know it presents a barrier for authentic public engagement with advisory councils and commissions. Do we want their input and comments or don't we? And how we deal with what we're told has a lot to do with whether or not they'll ever come back again or if they have any interest in what we're talking about, you know. So I just raised that because it's not just this commission. I see it in all the public bodies, you know. a room full of people sometimes. And they leave there saying, well, are they gonna discuss what we asked about? Well, do we get an answer to the question? You know, some kind of respectful response without getting into a give and take argument or dialogue. So I'll toss that out there for us to think it through. How can we, you know, in this environment we live in today, how can we improve upon that without wrecking our meetings or, you know, turning into a hoorah? But we have to acknowledge and respect citizens when we ask them to come forward with their issues, concerns, and comments. Other than, thank you,
Having,
and move on,
having a mechanism to follow up
something.
to.
And I don't know what the something is, but I just think as we move into the next level of community engagement to community encouragement, we've got to find a way to be somewhat more respectful of someone who take the time to come to a meeting, to sit and listen, you know. So I'm not looking for a solution tonight, but I just raised that as we've got this document open and are looking for, you know, the most equitable ways to make sure our public is thought about on the other end of this comment thing.
I totally get it. To your point, is it something that if it's something that we could answer right then and there or point them to, then if we have that, I think, you know, maybe we should point them to that. Otherwise, I think if they fill out the form saying, you know, hey, I'd like to speak, we could definitely take note and say, we've got your name and number, and maybe can point it to somebody that could follow up with them. That would probably be my only suggestion. My only concern with maybe all of it is if somebody got, if by chance we got somebody that put in a request for public comment and they, you know, write up, you know, this is what I'd like to speak about, and then they get there and they just totally throw us a curveball and speak on something else. How does that get handled?
Well, I think I'll start with the latter and then I'll circle back to the former. I think in an incident like that, Commissioner Hart, you'd still allow them to speak their 3 minutes, again, as long as it didn't go over into the hate crime offense. But allowing them that same time that you're providing everybody else who's provided public comment. Again, this was a tool to kind of help us try to get a little bit more information and be prepared for what could come, but you're absolutely somebody could say, I want to talk about cookies, and then come up here and start talking about alligators. And that's just something that, you know, again, having their 3 minutes to talk about that topic in conversation, and then maybe the advisory board could say, you know, a better board to talk about that would be maybe the Zoological Society or something. To go back to the former point, which I think is a really good question, and it's something that we heard, you know, as part of, you know, council conversation as well. I think what we're trying to do with public comment is balance, again, how do we provide everybody the same opportunity, right, under that limited public forum? And I think the key things to keep in mind, and I think we'll certainly continue to think about this, is, you know, you can, again, provide that response. The idea is you're not getting into a dialogue, a back and forth with that individual. You may be providing, you know, information on the topic. But also what we provided in here is that you can always say, you know, could you please connect with a city staff member on what you are discussing? And that allows a city staff member. So here as an example, it says a city staff member will connect with you regarding your comments. And so that allows us to go meet them and understand a little bit more of like what's going on and, you know, what could be, you know, processes moving forward with that particular concern. So that is always something that is there. I think the other thing I would point to is that, you know, this body has been really good about hosting community forums, which is a different kind of distinction from public comment itself. And that can be more of a dialogue. The last couple of community forums you all have held, you've done that in small groups, and you have been able to have back and forth conversations with individuals. And so I think it's balancing, you know, those types of engagements with public comment.
If I may add, I think that that's a way in which this commission shows leadership among all of the various advisory boards currently constituted in the city. by making that a priority to have that kind of an outlet for engagement with the community, as opposed to just come for 3 minutes and say what's on your mind so that we can move on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hart, do you have another question? I see your hand still raised. Right, well, if there's no other questions on the handbook policy, and that portion of it, I will turn it over to Alyssa, and if we could just pass that down to Alyssa.
There we go. All right, so I'm gonna find. Ooh. I'm gonna test this. Is this the right one? Okay. All right, commissioners. Well, thank you again for having us this evening. We're going to review some public meetings and public records for you all. So tonight's presentation, we're going to go over a general overview, some of our key definitions, areas of compliance, some resources and best practices. So in an effort to make government affairs more open, transparent, and accessible, legislature passed the Open Public Meetings Act, or the OPMA, in 1971. This allows, in most cases, public access to the full details of all phases of deliberation, policy formulation, and decision-making process. So the Open Public Meetings Act, or OPMA, governs public meetings. So what constitutes a meeting? A meeting occurs when a quorum, or the majority of a governing body, when it gathers with the collective intent of transacting the governing body's business. Meetings do not have to be in person to be subject to the OPMA. And meetings can occur by telephone, email, or other electronic media, which is an important note, and will tie into compliance later on in the presentation. So what is a quorum? And we've covered this just earlier, but you'll hear a lot about it this evening. A quorum is the majority of the governing body, so that would be four for this commission. Government bodies that have voting and non-voting members, a quorum is the smallest number of people who must be present at a meeting for official decisions to be made by voting. I will also note that with a youth council representative, they are a voting member, but they do not count towards quorum. All right, so no quorum. What to do? So with a quorum, you can see that we have a lot of green circles and we can move right along ahead as intended. We can hold the meeting as we've scheduled and published. You all can take action. There's also a lot of components to facilitating a meeting, like live stream, the recording, and taking the minutes. And going to Chair's point, we're gonna get into this a little bit, but starting with no quorum, we lose a lot of that functionality. So if you all are here and it's getting close to 5:30 and you don't have a quorum, you are not able to start the meeting until a quorum is there. So we're gonna touch on some of the specific scenarios here, but without a quorum, you may not hold the meeting, you cannot take action. The live stream and recording, you connect with staff and we work through what to do in that circumstance. And then there's no minutes because there is no meeting. So this kind of ties back into communication. Life happens if you're running late and we know that a quorum is expected, let's say maybe in 5-10 minutes. We have some steps in the next slide that we're going to go over on. All right, how can we go ahead and proceed once we do have a quorum? We'll also cover losing a quorum. So you've had a quorum, the meeting has progressed, but ultimately a quorum is lost in the middle of the meeting. More or less immediately, no action can be taken first and foremost, and the meeting is adjourned. It's no longer a meeting of the body. So we're going to cover these yellow cautionary and big red X's in the following slides. All right, so going back to there's no quorum to start a meeting. Prior to the meeting start time, this is a good time for the chair and staff to kind of be connecting, confirming attendance with those who are here in person and that who are also remote. If it's recognized that a quorum is not there, but one is anticipated, working alongside staff to start the meeting as close to the scheduled start time. So that means coming online and making an announcement that you're waiting for a quorum and you anticipate on starting shortly. Once that, and then so the mute happens, we work with staff in order to do that, but you stay online as you're waiting for your quorum. And then once a quorum is achieved, you're able to start the meeting and proceed as normal. If a quorum is confirmed, you get to proceed with holding the meeting. However, if a quorum cannot be confirmed, you do have to come back online. The chair will work with staff to do so and announce that the meeting will not be held since a quorum is not here, and the meeting will be rescheduled for a future date. So tying back into the chair's question earlier, although it's not a best practice, there's no prohibit or nothing prohibits receiving information. So after all this should occur, if and the meeting is not being held, if those that are here in person want to discuss with staff or have a discussion, that is absolutely permitted. It's just not a meeting of the body anymore.
Then the meeting will be closed, the video would be
Yep.
closed.
We're not streaming it, nothing, it's no longer the body is meeting.
We had a situation at our last meeting
Okay.
where we didn't have a quorum to get started. The quorum eventually arrived, but I had suggested or moved or something that we proceed with the meeting minus any action items, which was incorrect at this point. But we had 3 different groups waiting to make presentations to us.
Mhm.
And the meeting we got the quorum eventually. The 4th person finally showed up, but nobody was on the line.
Okay.
And so technically speaking, we should not have proceeded with nothing until that quorum had arrived or some announcement that we didn't have a quorum and the meeting is delayed.
Mhm.
And that's where the communication helps to know that so-and-so is on the way and we're expecting them in the next 5 minutes kind of thing. But we were just kind of at a loss here with that was the biggest crowd we had at a meeting and no quorum.
Thank you, Commissioner, for it's a great point. Communication ultimately, that helps a lot of these scenarios and checking in with staff. And I think, referring to the meeting you're talking about, a quorum was achieved and the meeting did proceed.
Right.
And so we have some best practices to kind of work around those scenarios, especially if there are external parties and everybody here present. But ultimately, we're not live streaming, we're not holding a meeting of the body. All of that stops when a quorum is not there. So staff did a great job, the commission did a great job in handling that, but making an announcement to the public that may be waiting at 5:30 for the meeting to start, that, hey, we're actually gonna be starting a little bit later, we're waiting on a quorum. That stream continues to feed, the quorum is achieved, and then the meeting gets to proceed. So that is ultimately what we encourage, and the staff liaisons will work with the commission and the chair to do. And I think it's important to note kind of to that aspect, continuing to monitor. And we'll get into this when, what to do if a quorum is lost after a meeting has already started. So we're gonna cover that here in the next slide.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course. So again, especially with remote attendees, and we can all see them here, but making kind of a mental note, especially if you're close to a quorum, you don't have the full commission here, and the chair and staff will work together to announce that a quorum has been lost. Maybe somebody has had technical issues and just had to log off real quickly, or recognizing that if someone's getting up to take a break, does that impact the quorum? So chair with staff will announce that the quorum has been lost, but if a quorum is not expected to be regained, we have the meeting is immediately adjourned.
Okay.
And no action can be taken.
Right.
So if the quorum is expected to return, a pro tip really to provide a recess or a break so that everybody's given the same opportunity, and then everybody can come back together as the body to continue on with the meeting. And again, no action can be taken. So if you do need to step out, but you are going to be returning, communicating that, or highlighting to your chair, I'd like to request a break. can we offer that to the body, and doing so with communication, so they know, okay, yep, they're coming back. Or if you lose access to the remote attendee, sending a message over, trying to get logged back in, or what is it that's has transpired to lose the quorum.
So if I could just jump in for a
Please.
second, I recognize that sometimes Commission on Equity meetings can go late. And so please, if you do need to take that moment, take a break, communicate it, because we do have a mechanism, like Alyssa just mentioned, to be able to do that.
But if it doesn't cause you to lose a quorum, then it's just not a big deal, right?
I feel like we did that one time, we lost. You left early and then you had something to do, but anyway.
I always like to think if somebody's thinking it, there's other people thinking it too. And so a break for the good could be good for everyone involved, so.
And I think to that point too, highlighting, if you do have obligations later on in the evening and you do have to leave at a certain time, or you know, the schedule for, your meetings throughout the next several months, notifying staff right away, because if maybe you're not able to attend a September meeting, maybe there's 3 or 4 others, and then ultimately staff have that information ahead of time, and we don't, go through with having, agendas and materials published. We can let the body, reschedule and notify the public accordingly. So just checking in when those things
Yeah.
occur.
But I guess my specific question is, okay, we have all 7 here today. And if I go to the bathroom, do I need to ask for a break of the meeting?
Quorum is still present.
Is there gonna be a
This is
vote
1 out of
occurring
7.
during that break? So I think it, just checking in with where you're at in the meeting.
Right.
And if it's just presentation and informational only, and you'd like to step out,
Mhm.
there's nothing prohibiting.
I do think though, just recognizing again, like I said, like if we're one agenda item in and it's been 2 hours and we've got 3 others, maybe a break is a good thing for everyone. But yes, your point is true and accurate. Like you're not gonna lose quorum over that.
All right, so why is this important? Our intent by being here is for all present members here for the commission to receive education that qualifies as a refresher training. So as appointed advisory board members, you all must complete trainings under the OPMA within 90 days of your appointments. But there are also refresher courses required every 4 years. So instead of trying to keep track of everybody all individually, this is also a mechanism that we get to come here and chat with you all, but then also check off some boxes.
So this is our training.
This is your training.
So the last time you all took this was 3 years ago, and so we are now extending that training.
And we're not just here because we have to be. It's also, it's good information. But and just education and these conversations and understanding different circumstances really is the best investment to mitigate risk of violating the OPMA. So speaking of violations, so under the OPMA, any action taken at a meeting held in violation of the OPMA is considered null and void. Any members of a governing body who attends a meeting that knowingly it violates the OPMA, and there's can be a couple different reasons that it might be in violation, and we're gonna cover that. But they are subject to a potential personal liability of $500 for the first violation and $1,000 for the subsequent one. Any individuals who prevail against the agency in any court actions for violation of the OPMA will also be awarded costs or may be awarded costs and attorney fees. So there's some risk management at stake here. All right, so compliance is a shared responsibility, and that's where we have a lot of meeting support. The clerk's office, as well as our staff liaisons throughout the city, help ensure that meetings that are subject to the OPMA are adhering to some of the following requirements, but there are many others that we also have on our radar as well. So publishing the agendas, there is requirements under the OPMA of those parameters of making sure the agendas are published accordingly. Ensuring a quorum, so this kind of helps tie into that communication with your designated staff liaison, so that we know a quorum will be present. drafting our meeting minutes for you all to approve at subsequent meetings. These are the official record of the body. But also note that our public meetings portal does provide additional materials such as video, the recording, the minutes, any notices, and presentation material. And then proper noticing. We also notice potential quorums that may exist outside of this body's work. So if you all are invited to another meeting at the city with the city council perhaps, or another advisory board, we notice that just so that the public knows that a potential quorum may show up to another public meeting, or in some cases, public events hosted by the city. So not social events or anything of that nature. We don't need to get down into all of the details of where you might all show up at one time for a social event. But anything that the city is hosting or made aware of through kind of this body's work, we like to make sure that we just have on our radar and we let the public know.
So the question, so last week when we came to the city council meeting, we were a quorum within a quorum. Right? So you all make note of that, you highlight that somehow?
We try to do our best. I think for that instance, you all attended as attendees and did not, were not on the agenda of the meeting. It was not a specific invite, although I did have a couple, like, there's 4 of them sitting together.
Who noticed?
Maybe a few of us, but no, that was not in violation. But at the same time, it's just, public optics and transparency, just making sure that we kind of have all of that aware and we're presenting ourselves just in the best way. So that wasn't a violation in any way, but should you have been on the agenda and the council invited the Commission on Equity, we would have noticed a potential quorum for the meeting.
I think, adding on to what Alyssa said, that's where, again, communication with your staff liaison is key too, of like, if we know in advance, we can provide that notification that there will be a potential quorum for that type of event.
Great question. So some meeting support continued. We touched on this a little bit, but the public meetings portal, this is where you get to go and retrieve all your public meeting material, the packet information, presentations, and then once the minutes are approved, we upload them here as well. So this is for your own meetings as well as any other public meetings that the city hosts. Staff liaisons, they are a great resource. Any questions or concerns, definitely reach out. The advisory board handbook, as Shannon outlined, that is available in this lower screenshot here by going to our homepage and clicking government and the advisory boards. It's linked right there on that page. So you're able to get the most current copy and refer to it if you have any questions or just some light reading. Available trainings. This is part of our education, our roadshow, so to speak. So we are kind of making our rounds through all the advisory boards, but as things change or updates are made, we want to make sure we come back to you all and communicate that so you have the best education and most up-to-date information. And if you have a question, ask a clerk. We're here to help. All right, so how can you help? So we have this set up for having designated staff members distribute informational documents for meetings to each member. And this will kind of lead into the next 2 bullets that tie into that compliance we spoke of. So passive receipt of information is permitted, but discussions by any means with a majority of the governing body can constitute a meeting and may be in violation of the OPMA. So a meeting could occur in email. And electronic, in different electronic media. So this is why staff send out information. Typically a lot of information that comes to you all, especially if there's a majority, says please do not reply all. And we don't want any kind of serial meetings being inadvertently created. And a serial meeting occurs when a majority of members have a series of smaller conversations or gatherings that result in a majority of the body collectively taking action, or discussing action, even if a majority is never part of one communication. So all that to say that communications can create a public meeting that is in violation. It hasn't been properly noticed. There's no agenda. The public is not being provided full access. And so that is what those communication practices are in place with staff relaying information to you all, but ultimately not replying all and creating a serial meeting. So all that to say, don't send an email to all or a majority of each other. And then when you get information from staff, not replying all. I do recognize that there are some administrative things that might need to occur when it comes down to scheduling or maybe conflicts. Give all of that to the staff liaison, and that's part of kind of our process to compile and then propose maybe the most opportune dates or what would work for the majority. Playing it smart with travel arrangements, same thing. This is something that, especially for transparency purposes, just not having a quorum all in a cart together. And if you do, talk only about the weather. As well as advising staff liaisons, again, we've talked about this, and the chair if possible, but maybe the chair is also going to be absent that meeting. So really just leaning into your staff liaison when you're unable to attend a meeting, or if you're going to be late or have any obligations that you might need to leave early. All right, that concludes public meetings. How are we feeling with questions? Good?
Good.
All right. So part 2, we're going to cover the Public Records Act. So the Public Records Act was enacted in 1972 to provide the people with broad rights of access to public records. Washington State's Public Records Act is one of the strongest open government laws in the nation and supports a transparent and accessible government. So what is a public record? Public records are defined as any writing prepared, owned, used, or retained by a state or local agency. So as an advisory board member here for the city, that applies to all of your work. And that can fall into any of these different variations of collaboration tools and communication. So the roles that you serve as advisory board members extends here for the Public Records Act. Yes.
So if it's a draft stage, so it's not finalized document, that it's not subject to public record.
That is
No?
incorrect.
That's incorrect?
That is incorrect,
Oh.
yeah. So, and really, there's a couple components to that. So, documents can be in draft form, and ultimately, when maybe the final, gets adopted, we have retention laws in place that allow the city to, maybe we don't need to keep all the drafts, or maybe we only have to keep the drafts for a set period of time. So retention applies and disposition then occurs for those documents. But under the Public Records Act, that draft is disclosable should it be asked for. And so there are some limited exemptions that may apply to drafts depending on if there's legal involved or some other components to how this, what the business is being conducted. But most drafts, especially in kind of the way that this body works, would not necessarily be protected. So any work that is being done is a public record, but whether it's disclosed is part of our work in looking at for any applicable exemptions that could apply.
Oh, okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, we were told to put draft on everything.
No, I take away draft stamps. No, and so to that, but marking draft is great, is great. I'm teasing in the way that it doesn't give a sense of confidentiality or that it's not disclosable, but marking it as a draft just so that we all know that this is not the final copy, or if it were to get asked for and released, this is a working document. This is not what is final and approved. So I give you back your draft stamp. All right, electronic versus physical records. Any communication and documents, so kind of touching on all those different platforms created, received, or used as part of your duties may be considered a public record. There is no distinction regarding whether or not the record was created or stored on a personal device or account. I recognize you all have city issued email addresses, so those are being captured and preserved in accordance with all of our state laws. And so if you want to go through and manage your inbox or you delete and organize it in such a way, that all works just fine. We have it preserved on our servers. But also recognizing to kind of one of the key points that Shannon mentioned earlier, not creating unnecessary records. So if you do need to let staff know that you're not gonna be able to attend a meeting, you don't need to go into all the details of the why or where you'll be, or some of these additional personal details that maybe don't belong in that message. If you would like to provide additional details as to the why, a phone call sometimes works even better. Should that be an opportunity to share and update staff.
So the question I have is, stored on personal device or account? How is that applicable to if I had a conversation with chair on my personal cell phone, that can be?
It may, it depends, so it depends on the discussion and the role in which you're having a conversation. So maybe you reached out to chair and had, a personal conversation, you saw her at a barbecue last Saturday. That is not the role of the advisory board's work, but if you are having conversations offline, those may be subject to the Public Records Act and be considered public records. So ultimately, the city's way to help navigate and prepare for any such kind of organization of public records is to issue the city issued email addresses and having all of your work be conducted on that email account so that it does not expose your personal account or device to any liabilities should a request be received.
What if it's just between she and I, we're not gonna say anything, that we had some conversation?
We're stuck on food. Cookies.
But how would you know that? Oh, okay, you and I know, maybe we should disclose.
And I guess to kind of maybe understand the process, if a public records request is received to the city that identifies communication between Commission on Equity members, I would come to each, or Paul or Brandy would come to each of you all and provide an affidavit that where we are looking to have, these are the search terms and the parameters. And while I may not, open up a personal device or account, that is something that you may all have to attest to, that you do not have any public records that meet this criteria and that you checked all of these accounts. So that is something that we have in place for if a request leads us to conduct a reasonable search that may extend to other devices, that would occur.
And to add on to that, and it sounds like, Paul, you've got an addition too. If the records do exist, the clerks are gonna work with you on a way to get
Yes.
the records. So, with that affidavit process. So, Paul.
No, I was just going to suggest that we keep in mind that one of the ways that governments and authorities have traditionally excluded people from decision-making processes historically is by doing this very thing. Having side conversations that are sheltered from the public eye. That is the spirit behind why we have all of these rules.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question about our email, our city emails. Is it okay to erase, delete some? Cause
You-
it is,
yep,
or
that is
whatever, it goes
perfectly-
somewhere else, but.
Yeah, no, so
Just so.
all of the emails that come,
That's it.
please, yeah, organize, folder, delete, all of those things are absolutely acceptable. You're at cityoflacey.org emails, anything that comes in or goes out from those email accounts are captured before they even hit the recipient or your own inbox. So that is something that you don't have to have a lift on your end in managing.
Okay, great.
All right, so the city is subject to legal authorities that require public records be retained for different lengths of time depending on the content. So we touched on that as well. So state and local agencies, sorry, just read that part. So the active preservation and destruction of public records is governed by one statute under the RCW, while the Public Records Act with the disclosure governs the availability and disclosure of those public records. So the clerk's office kind of spearheads these two statutes to make sure that all of our practices are in place to best align us with both of these legal authorities. Requests for public records can be made formally or informally to any employee or elected official. And what I mean by informally is more or less that they do not need to fill out a specific form. They don't need to go to a specific website. While the city does have we invite the public to a specific portal to log in and submit their public records requests directly to us. That is not a requirement that we can put out there. So any employee or potentially advisory board member could receive a public records request, and ultimately that starts our statute to respond. So this is something that it is crucial that any request for agency records be forwarded to the disclosure staff, so the clerk's office, as soon as possible. And so I'm touching on this a little bit more or less because you all have city issued email accounts. And there is maybe an opportunity that a member of the public would reach out to you and submit a public records request to that email account. So monitoring those frequently, putting out automated replies if you are expected to be absent for a while, just to ensure that that mailbox is managed and that a request doesn't go unseen or unprocessed by the clerk's office. To that note, agencies are subject to the strict response timelines, and that is a 5 business days of receipt. So that is kind of that really firm deadline that we have to respond. And that's something that we don't put that responsibility on any others. You don't need to respond to those, but just getting those over to the clerk's office. So we're able to meet that 5-day. Going back to the emails, we've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but city may provide advisory board members with email addresses. This advisory board is one of those that does have city issued email addresses. And the email accounts may not be used for any personal communication. So it's really just your role here on the advisory board and conducting business. All city email accounts to this point, we've mentioned, but will be captured and retained per our city policies and legal requirements. So no management done on your end other than just forwarding information to staff should we need to have it. This is our area of expertise. We love records in the clerk's office. The city clerk is the official public records officer for the agency, but there is a whole team and network of us. The staff within the city clerk's office, as well as the police department and joint animal services, all have designated disclosure staff that work to make sure that the city stays in compliance and gives that accessibility to public records to those who request it. Checking in with your designated staff liaison or the clerk's office if you have any questions or just kind of want to know more about this process and maybe how it might impact you. All right, how can you help? Being mindful in creating records, including taking notes. This isn't something that we want to advise against creating public records. We all need to create public records. You guys are doing great work and that needs to be documented. But just being mindful in doing so, or and making sure that those notes and everything is fact oriented in those records that we create.
Our little scribble pads.
If they are retained and they do pertain to the body's work and you still have them, they may be subject to disclosure. That is correct. Only using city technology in accordance with policies and legal requirements. So we did touch on that. Don't delete records created in your official capacity without checking with staff. So we've all made it clear emails are okay on your city issued email account. We've got that covered for you all. But if you are being requested to submit some scoring rubrics and some additional information back to staff, make sure they got it and they received it before disposing of it on your side, because we don't need extra duplicate copies in areas. We'll manage the official records on our city servers that are backed up and ultimately make up the body's work. Don't retain records created in your official capacity once transferred. So once Shannon or whoever you're working with has confirmed, I've got it, it's received and it's part of the packet, you may now delete all of your instances. That is now a duplicate copy and it does not need to be retained. And then checking again your city issued email accounts frequently and using automated replies if you expect a prolonged absence, just to make sure that that is being managed should anybody try to submit a request to you. That concludes public meetings and public records. Are there Any additional questions? We had a lot of good ones. It's basically pros. All right, well then I think I'm going to, do you mind passing this down to Shannon so she can then pass it over?
They're not gonna make it through the meeting.
Thank you. All right, good evening, commissioners. My name again is Paul White, and this is Brandy Legamina, and we are your deputy city clerks. Tonight, we're gonna give you a high-level intro into Robert's Rules of Order and provide some pro tips to help you get the most out of your meetings. Hopefully you've all brought your copies so that we can go in page by page. And get great detail on every point. Did you remember to bring the diagnostic tests, the quizzes? Oh, darn. Okay, well, perhaps this will only be like a 15-minute presentation after all.
Sorry, guys.
Right, so like I said, this is just high level introductory type stuff. So if you're a registered parliamentarian, we apologize in advance. Essentially, Robert's Rules of Order is it's a system for conducting group meetings clearly, fairly, and efficiently. Our goal tonight is to reduce any of the intimidating, bothersome, or bureaucratic notions that you may have about how Robert's Rules works, so that you can face situations that come up in meetings clearly and calmly. Let's start with what Robert's Rules are intended for and go over some basic principles. So Robert's is a system we use so that everyone has a chance to be heard. We all know what we're agreeing to in the end. And nobody gets to waste everyone else's time, okay? Tonight, we're gonna go over each of these topics. One at a time is just a way of shorthanding that we do things one at a time and we participate one at a time. So one person speaks at a time. We go through one subject at a time. It's orderly in that way. We use motions to take action. Now, we realize that for advisory boards, quite a lot of your work is not actually taken up in the activity of making specific decisions. A lot of that is discussion, debate, conversational. And we are not trying to suggest that you change that or the character of how you do that at all. What we're trying to shine a light on here is that when you are ready to do things, that that you're aware that there is a pattern to do that will help keep everything organized and fair. So when we do take the action, we're going to use the motion to do that, and a motion does require a second. Yes, there are some exceptions to these, but this is not the graduate level presentation tonight. Okay. We give every topic of discussion full consideration in the form of a full and free discussion. We speak and act with courtesy and professionalism. That's what we mean by decorum. And when it's time to decide, we vote. And the way that we vote is so that we can protect the rights of different groups within the body. For example, the majority has the right to make decisions by a vote. So that 100% unanimity is not necessarily required. The minority has the right that a quorum be present when transacting business. Individuals have rights. For example, the right of the rules to be followed. Okay, and there are others, but those are just examples of how Roberts represents a way of balancing the rights of different groups within the whole. So to call a meeting to order, you can, everyone get your bingo card ready, because you will have heard this several times tonight. There must be a quorum. No action can be taken without a quorum. And unfortunately, if there aren't enough members present in person or remotely, your remote members count for quorum. The meeting will not take place and it will need to be rescheduled. It's important to understand that all the countless hours that are put into meeting preparation, the invitation of external parties to present, for example, as I think we were mentioning earlier tonight, all of those things. And so when you lack the quorum, then basically there's a waste of time when you have that unexpected lack of that quorum. So, and we talked about this a little bit as well, and here on the slide, I did highlight that for a board of 7 members, 4 would be the quorum. We somehow managed to lose quorum during the meeting. Then what we want to make sure you understand is that meeting of the body has to adjourn and no further actions of the body can take place. And of course, we've discussed some of those nuances already.
So a meeting pro tip would be, everybody, get your bingo doppers, is to communicate with your staff. Everybody can understand that, sometimes you're running late. Of course, when you're running late, you're gonna hit every red light. But when this happens, communicate with staff. Let us know that we should be anticipating a quorum and that we can start our meeting shortly once we achieve a quorum. If you're going to be on vacation, if you're gonna be running late, or even if you're going to be remote, letting staff know your intentions so that we can better plan for a more effective meeting for everybody.
So when it comes to actions, and we're ready to have a motion, this is how you will do things as a group. And I've mentioned already that this is not meant to curtail in any way your conversational style when you do discussion. When you present a motion, you want to present it as a positive statement, not a negative statement. In the example we have on the slide here is, I move to have ice cream on Mondays. Okay. As opposed to, I move to not have ice cream on Mondays. That's the thing we want to avoid. We want to put questions in front of the body as a whole that are actions that they can say yes or no to. When a motion is seconded, that is the indication that the body's giving permission for further conversation to happen. If a motion doesn't get a second, then it doesn't get discussed. Now, you may have heard from time to time, people say things like, well, that motion dies for the lack of a second. Well, technically, that motion hasn't actually died. It never existed because it was never seconded. So, if one person could have a great idea, but if all of the other 6 have already decided that they don't want to go there, then insisting on discussing it, that would be a waste of the body's time as a whole. That's the principle involved.
So why do you say majority when it only takes one more person to second to have discussion or move?
Well, it's a sort of a way of exercising the majority's right in the absence of an action. By withholding the second, you're basically saying, no, I don't think that we should continue to have this conversation.
Okay, what I meant is, now you have first person making the motion to move, and the second person saying, I motion to, what, second? Yeah, so now you have two, right?
Mhm.
Out of, is that still majority? I
Well,
mean, in our case.
It is the, well, no, what's happening there is that you have there's the right of the minority as well. And so if two people, as many as two, think that that's a good thing to discuss, even if the whole group in the end rejects it, those two people have a right to put that discussion in front of the group.
Okay, so
And I-
next.
That's why a second is required.
Next one is discussion.
Yeah, and I think too, to add that the majority for the vote is what passes it. The second's just opening it up for discussion. So you're not, by seconding something, you're not voting in favor. You're just saying, I think we should just, I agree in discussing, moving this forward to discuss. And then the majority comes into play with the vote more as well, I think, for where we would have to do.
That's very helpful, thank you.
The
Is
second could,
is it-
in the end, vote no on something.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just,
Well, particularly
Bringing
if
the-
it is amended along the way and turns into a different question.
Yep.
Yeah, particularly that. So there are many different kinds of motions, but the ones that are most relevant to the meetings that we will engage in are main motions, like our ice cream example, amendments and points of order. Points of order are technically a kind of motion.
So meeting pro tip, a good motion is a statement that begs the question with a yes or no answer. For example, I move to have ice cream on Mondays, not I move to have ice cream or spinach on Mondays, Tuesdays, or Fridays. Don't do that. To make it easy on yourself, have your motion written down ahead of time. By overcomplicating motions, you can create confusion and ambiguity, so this might help just make your motion a little clearer. And keep it as simple as you can without changing the meaning. For example, I move to recommend the staff report to city council as presented.
No need to restate the entire history of, what's in the staff report necessarily. Amendments are another kind of motion. Sometimes the main motion is pretty good, but it just needs a little something. Amendments, they're not insults, right? They are alternatives. So, when we feel like there's something that could perfect the main motion, that's when we'll offer the amendment. Amendments do require a second, and it is its own motion. And because we try to take a little of the sort of emotional aspect out of it for the sake of everything being orderly and dispassionate, we encourage people not to think of amendments as friendly, because it sort of suggests that, oh, the other amendments weren't friendly. And really, that friendly amendment doesn't have any special privileges that any other motion doesn't have, okay? Once you move and second to amend the original question, the ownership of that activity passes to the whole group. So now the whole group gets to decide what happens to it. So we have the example here using our ice cream theme. I move to amend the motion to read strawberry ice cream. Sorry, Shannon.
No second for me.
No second from Shannon. So,
So pro tip is to remember that the amended motion is not the original motion. It's important to go back and vote on the original motion before moving on to the amendments.
So I just want to make sure that at what point is it proper to move to amend a motion? If you have a motion on the floor already, is it during discussion? Someone in the middle of discussion, someone can move to amend the original motion?
Right, so
Okay.
you can actually make an amendment at any time. Robert's Rules does make room for small committees such as this one to be able to do that,
Before a vote.
to discuss amendments before a vote, yeah.
The important thing is you've got a particular question on the table that everybody understands. And before that is actually voted on and carved in stone, as it were, that's the opportunity for the amendment to be moved. And if you have a motion and a second, then the amendment has to be considered.
So in the example of ice cream for, if somebody made the motion for ice cream on Mondays,
I make a motion to have ice cream on Mondays.
then I second it, and then it's open for discussion. Somebody could say,
Someone could say, well, I'm lactose intolerant, but then someone else could say, well, I move to amend the motion to read strawberry ice cream. For that matter, instead of grapes. Then we wait for the second.
Then you vote on the amendment.
And then you vote, your vote at that point is on the amendment.
Right.
Whether or not to change the original question.
To strawberry ice cream.
And
So-
if people to hate that idea and that motion, that amendment
Amendment fails.
fails, you still have to go back and decide the question of whether or not you're gonna have ice cream.
Right.
and I
It
may
is-
now with the strawberry ice cream say, you know what? I don't want strawberry ice cream if that motion had passed, the amendment had passed that, so.
Yeah, you might change how you wanted to vote on that, yeah. Mhm. Absolutely. All right, so point of order, I think in the case of this group and probably most of our advisory boards, I think these are gonna be pretty rare. But they deserve going over a little bit because it is a kind of motion. It's a particular kind of motion that doesn't require a second. Because a point of order is connected to the right of the individual member of the group. So you don't need consent of someone else to bring it. Here are the characteristics of this kind of motion. It legitimately interrupts the flow of the meeting. The business has to stop until the question of order has been resolved. It has to be raised as soon as whatever error is there has been noticed. Otherwise, you might move on to other business and it becomes much harder to go back and redo. And the chair must resolve the point. And if the chair doesn't, isn't hitting it on all cylinders and doesn't quite get it right, the group can disagree. And by a majority vote, can overturn the ruling of the chair. Okay. So, an example would be point of order that the chair failed to call for the nays. One of the things we do is we make sure we call for the nays and the yeas. And the chair might say, well, actually, I did request the nays, so the point's not well taken. That's the ruling, okay? But because we're still trying to be as supportive and we're trying to maintain decorum and respect for one another, at that point, the chair might also add, however, would the member like to request that that vote be retaken? And that gives everybody an opportunity to be on the same page and to make sure, and maybe that member just did not hear that the nays were called for. It's unclear whether they were intending to vote nay. We're gonna give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And if you catch it before the chair has actually declared the vote, you can just retake that vote, for example. Whereas if you've moved on to other business, it becomes much harder. So the whole point of all of that being, particularly the point of order, that what we try to do is we try to assume good intent and take a solution-oriented approach toward things. As I said, points of order will most likely be very rare. But it is a good way to make sure that we're not going too fast through something, that we haven't missed an important step.
So a pro tip for our chair here is if things are starting to get a little bit weird It's okay to take a break. There's a number of reasons that we can take a recess. The point you want to remember though is if the board does agree to take a recess, is to announce that to the staff and to public and announce what time you're going to be coming back from that recess so that the public can be aware of when to come back for business.
So once that motion has been made and seconded it? Yeah, I said that. It should be discussed among the board. Roberts offers some structure for discussion that helps to keep it clear and orderly. Roberts indicates that the member making the motion has the first opportunity to discuss it. From there, it is the presiding officer's responsibility to make sure that everyone else has an opportunity to speak on that motion or in the discussion. And particularly that everyone has that opportunity before anyone takes a second opportunity to speak again. This is really the meat and potatoes of how you get to the place where you can make your decision. And the important thing, of course, is to remember to be courteous and professional. All the board members have the opportunity to express their thoughts. As long as it's orderly and one at a time, you will come to the outcome that you need to have.
So a pro tip for our chair would be to have a list of all your board members. That way, when you're starting discussion, you can go round robin style and you can solicit comments from each member in which they have the opportunity to speak or they can pass. But it does allow the opportunity for everyone to participate.
So when we're debating, and this gets back to our concept of decorum in debate. This is it's a healthy way for boards to determine the best course of action. This is how you're gonna suss out everyone's opinions about the proposals that are being put in front of you. But it's vital that discussions stay on the point of the subject that's being debated. And there is not room for remarks that do not pertain to the debate. And I can't think of a board that less needs to hear this, but I will read them off anyway. Personal remarks, insulting language, personal attacks, profanity, such as vulgarity or inflammatory remarks. We all know what these sound like. And I will say, fortunately or not, depending on your perspective, it's important to remember that during their 3 minutes of comment, the public are not bound by those rules. There, the issue is one of disruption, actual disruption of your meeting, with certain exceptions that Shannon has described.
So a pro tip is if things are getting a little hot in the meeting, some good tactics for communication would be to speak in the third person and direct all your comments to the chair. These are ways to help mitigate some fiery discussion or fiery arguments. And also, as you guys know, it's also okay to take a break at that point in time, kind of just level things out a little bit.
So when we're coming down to the vote, we thoroughly discussed a topic. You can call for the vote, and for there to be action, the win must be by majority vote. Now, there may be times when a member may have a conflict of interest on the item being discussed. What do we mean by conflict of interest? Well, conflict of interest is any situation in which financial or other personal considerations may unduly influence the member's judgment on the subject. So if you believe that you have a conflict of interest, you want to discuss that conflict with staff as soon as you discover it. And certainly before the meeting at which that item is going to be discussed starts. And you want to refrain from participating in the discussion and the voting process on that particular item. It's that sort of that Heisenberg principle where they say that the observer affects the experiment. And so ideally, I mean, how do you refrain from participating? One way is to simply not speak. What is another?
Body language.
And how do you prevent that body language?
To leave the room.
Yeah,
You
leave
might
the
leave the
room.
room. You might leave the room. Yeah. Although I can't tell you how many times I've been in situations where the conflict of interest didn't come up until they were getting ready for the vote. And that's an embarrassing situation to be in when you're supporting your elected officials, but it sometimes happens.
So pro tip, Chair, remember to vote. You're also part of the board as well.
Don't forget that.
Make sure you vote and make sure you ask for the yays and the nays, even if there aren't any, be sure to ask for them. And once the vote is done, be sure to declare the outcome that the motion carries. One way to also help with some of effective and efficient meetings is to use the unanimous consent. This counts for everybody that there is consent. And board members, if you do feel partial to a yay or a nay, it is up to you to speak up at that point. So make sure you pause and allow your board members to speak their yays and nays.
This is a really helpful tool for those times when you're pretty sure everyone's already in agreement. Okay, and it will help. It's a really good efficiency tool, provided you give that pause. When you say, if there is no objection, then the minutes are approved. And then you wait. And it's the member's responsibility to speak up, including unmuting themselves if they're participating remotely, which sometimes is really easy to forget to do. At that point, then they have to say, and if they don't, then something everybody already agreed to is done and you can move on. Regarding remote attendance, of course you
Before
want.
you go to.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. So when there's a voice vote and you get some yays and some nays, who can ask for voice vote? What is the proper? I mean, a show of hands or stand or something.
Anyone can ask
Anyone.
for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that is again, an individual right.
It's also a helpful tool for the public watching, but also any of us is sitting further away from the table that are taking the minutes or maybe recording the motion and the votes. Just to kind of, especially when you have online and in person, making that visual and audible, so that's very clear.
Sometimes it is difficult to, especially if we don't know all of your voices very well, to figure out who made the motion and who made the second, if we're sitting all the way over there. So it never hurts to say, oh, that motion's been made by Commissioner Jackson, that motion's been seconded by Commissioner Hart.
Yeah, in other meetings and organizations, we have where the person say, second by Cliff Brown, or, Brother Brown moves
Also an
that this
excellent
happens. That way we use our name, so that way it's,
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, very helpful for us, and I think the public appreciates it too, honestly. Remember, if you are remotely attending, to use the raise hand. We'll try to maybe not have hand-shaped cursors on the screen. And this one is not directed at anyone, but it is a best practice, and that is to make sure that your video as well as your audio are on during the meeting, at least for the vote, at least for a vote. But in fact, I believe Brandy, you have a pro tip for us on that.
Okay, leading right into our pro tip. Keeping your video on is a transparent gesture that you are present and participating. It's wonderful that we have the technology that we have that allows us to view and participate in these public meetings. But we understand that there might be some technical difficulties sometimes. As a good faith gesture to transparency, default to have your cameras on. And if there are any technical difficulties, immediately communicate that to your staff so that we can start troubleshooting that scenario.
And I mean, sometimes that technical difficulty is you've just had a root canal. And you can't keep yourself, you've got a big pack on your face, or it could, be something like that as well. Just a few miscellaneous things before we wrap up. A note, first of all, that sometimes it can be helpful to have some prompts to rely on to work through the meeting. And so if scripted language is helpful, we can help provide that. It's as much in our interest to help you have a smooth meeting as it is in yours. Calling out names at the start of the meeting, as you all did do, does provide transparency and accountability. So, kudos for doing that. And as we have mentioned before, meetings can get long, and if you need it, individual members can request a few minutes of recess. And usually the board is pretty okay with that,
Or to adjourn the meeting, right?
Well, you can try. So, we were curious if you had any questions for us, or if you had any tricky scenarios that had come up for you in meetings.
Okay, so what is the proper language when the chair is seeking a motion? Chair would say, I'll entertain a motion for this or on this subject. That's the proper language.
That's beautiful, beautiful. A motion would be in order now, is, also perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, if it's something that there's general unanimity about, if there's no objection, then, is also an option. Anyone else? Anyone of our remote participants have anything in particular that they wanted to mention or ask?
Nope, not at this time, except for my mute button keeps getting stuck, so.
This happens. Sometimes it's helpful for the chair just to say, to give people another opportunity and say, knowing that sometimes people aren't aware of whether that mute button is on or off, it doesn't hurt. Well, thank you so much for your attention and for having us here tonight. We really appreciate it. Let us know if we can be resources to you in any way.
Thank you, thank you.
We'll do the quiz next time.
To be on. It's a great impression. Things change.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
All your equipment. How many phones you got?
Two.
All right, our next order of business is Human Services update with Michelle Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and greetings, committee members. Thank you for being here tonight. Again, my name is Michelle Chavez and I'm with the City of Lacey. I am the Human Services Coordinator for the city, and I'm here to give you an update on a few items. I think this is my third time being here to the committee, so to the commission, so happy to be back.
Just have a few slides for you today. Our first item of discussion is our Human Services Commission. So we have been, as you know, we've had a Human Services Work Group that was stood up in 2024. It was approved by Resolution 1145 from the City Council. And there's an ad hoc Human Services Work Group in order to help us with our new $300,000 Human Services Grant Program that the council allocated for Human Services work in Lacey. So we are happy to say we have 7 folks on that commission that's been active since June. And we also have a new youth council member, similar to how you all have a youth council member assigned. We also have a youth council member now that we're gonna be meeting with. So
That commission, not a work.
it's a work group right now.
Oh.
We are gonna talk about
Oh,
potentially
oh,
becoming a commission. So what we're gonna talk about tonight is kind of an overview of the human services oversight needs in Lacey and why we have this work group and potential commission. And look at comparable jurisdictions and to discuss future options for our human services oversight at the city. So kind of what the oversight needs are, we have some allocations where we need community input on how the dollars are allocated. We have the Human Services Grant Program, which is approximately 300,000. We've gone through the process now where we are going to be setting forth some recommendations for the city council to award those dollars, and I'm gonna talk to you all about that in a little bit. We also have our Community Development Block Grant Program, which is traditionally the city of Lacey has been a recipient through the Thurston County Consortium, where we would get our dollars through Thurston County every 3 years. And the city council took action, and I believe it was July, that they would like to receive that money directly from Housing and Urban Development Department. It's a federal funds. So we are going to we've taken action to receive those funds directly next year in 2025. So that is another pot of funds that would need community oversight from the community to allocate. So we have 2 different human services pots that we need help with in terms of determining how those funds will be allocated and what kind of the priorities will be. There could be other pots of funding that becomes available through different agencies, federal government, state, et cetera, where the city might need help. So that's why we're looking at potentially setting up a human services commission that would be permanent, not just ad hoc. So currently our human services work group was set up to meet once per month or as needed through the end of this year, but no longer than 1 year. They review our applications for grants and they make recommendations to the city council for funding allocations. They advise on a needs assessment, and I'm going to talk to you all about our human services survey that we talked about last time I was here. That's live now, so I'm going to show you a link to that in a little bit. Make recommendations for long-term priorities, so that helps us with our community outreach and engagement to get feedback from the community on what are the priorities, where should the city of Lacey allocate their resources. And then making its decision on the Human Services Advisory Board. So again, we've already been to them once with the commission idea, and we're gonna be going back to them on October 3rd. To talk more about it, and then if they make a recommendation to create a permanent commission, we would go to city council November 5th, potentially. So our human services work group, again, we have 7 general members, 1 youth member, 5 reside in the city of Lacey, and 2 may reside in the UGA. And there's 2 professionals with human services experience that we want on that group. So that's an individual that has direct service, management, or volunteer work in the human services field. So the initial funding was 300,000 for housing, survival, and security, maximum 50,000 for capital projects. The Community Development Block Grant, we have 3 different work products we need to put together in order to receive those funds. We need to do a lot of community engagement with participation, write a 3-year consolidated plan and annual action plan. Those dollars could have oversight from the work group, a potential human services commission, city council, or a mix of other individuals. Annual funding allocation from HUD. And then the funding begins in fall of 2025 with Lacey CDBG work products due in July. So this is just a brief example that I brought to the Human Services Work Group and the City Council, and now you're all seeing it. How do we get here? We looked at a selection of like 5 or 6 different jurisdictions across the state of Washington and Oregon, and what were the best practices. And so like all of them have some kind of standalone advisory board. And those that had CDBG and this kind of general fund pot of money, they would also have a different, the advisory group would oversee both those pots. So as you see, most of them have the same, like a Human Services Commission or a Community Service Advisory Board or a CDBG Advisory Board. So we are recommending to our work group that we set aside option number 1, which is to recommend an ordinance to the Lacey City Council to create a permanent Human Services Commission. And you all have a sample in your packet. So along with your staff report, there's a sample resolution that's not been fully vetted by the city attorney, has it right now, but that's our goal, is to moving forward, if we're gonna have these ongoing general fund dollars to allocate to the community, it's really helpful to have a community advisory board to oversee that. And then if we end up becoming the CDBG federally funded entitlement community, it really helps to have a community advisory group to oversee those dollars as well, because the federal government funds has a lot of regulations and requirements that requires a lot of community input, oversight, public comment period, et cetera. So having an advisory group just makes it so much easier to stay on track. So we have 5 options we presented to the group. Option 2 is to not create the commission, but extend the existing work group for a year. So that would help us to determine the 2025 applications pending we get those back, get those dollars in the budget next year. I believe it is slotted tentatively for refunding in the 2025 budget. The Human Services Grant Program.
So yeah, it's definitely a pending item, and obviously the council is still working on their budget workshop tomorrow, and then we'll be continuing conversations on the budget over the next couple of meetings.
And I think the budget gets approved in December.
Correct.
So again, they would continue on this work group. Their plan is to help us make recommendations on long-term priorities. And again, should we set up a permanent advisory board? Option 3 would be don't recommend to Lacey Council. That would establish a permanent commission. Do not recommend a resolution. Option 4, further staff direction. Hey, we thought about this, go back, do more research, come back to us. And then option 5, something else that we may not have thought of. There's always a potential. So again, the option number 1 was to recommend Human Services Commission to oversee the human service needs, policies, programs, funding, and include future human service grant programs and the including human services grant programs and the community development block grant program. So I'll open up for quick questions on that.
So we just did our strategic plan
Mhm.
and we set some baselines, and we're gonna be tracking progress on the various departments in a number of areas. So will this be an addition to this, where we, after a year or 2 or whatever on an annual basis, we look at how those funds are being allocated and are they being allocated equitably?
So the goal is to have the Human Services Advisory Group, whether it's the ad hoc group or the commission, to help us with the strategic plan. So very similar to your DEIB strategic plan, to help us kind of create that. And by doing our needs assessment and getting feedback from the community, going out and finding all that research, taking it back in, kind of crunching the data sets and then bringing forth a plan for the future, just similar to what you all did.
Commissioner, if I could add on to what Michelle said, you know, in the beginning of the staff report, it does draw attention to the goal that was identified in the diversity, equity, and belonging strategic plan, which is to, under livability and human services, provide support culturally appropriate human services that meet the needs of the Lacey community. And specifically, it identifies creating a strategic human services grant program that is transparent, consistent, and removes barriers to participation. And so all of the activities that Michelle is doing, you know, with the Human Services Work Group right now is building up to that. I think to your question, though, in the future, there is going to be opportunities for both the Human Services Work Group, and if it's changed to a commission, and the Commission on Equity to have conversations. And so, Michelle came here before you all a couple months ago to review the application. And I think there's gonna be certainly opportunities in the future to have those joint conversations. And that's why, she's here today is, we went over with the commission, the work group, excuse me, on kind of these options moving forward. And we wanted to bring it to you all too, to see, what your thoughts were on that transition. Because I think these two groups could work very closely together in a lot of things in the future, especially as we continue with the needs assessment, like Michelle just mentioned.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks online about the commission proposal? Seeing none, I will move forward.
Before we do, Michelle, maybe I can just, I mean, with the recommendation, are there any concerns from this group or just questions?
Well, it just, it seems like having a consistent same group over a number of years to watch over these projects and know what they did last year and, have that knowledge and going forward, that a permanent advisory board would seems like would make the most sense to me.
And if you notice in the resolution, a lot of the similarities to the Commission on Equity, we use kind of that template, that model, which is that you guys were the trailblazers to kind of get that model started. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can utilize what the city's already been successful at doing. So really appreciate all the work you guys have done as well.
And with advisory boards, so much work can be done, more work can be done because there's more people to help the staff, and vice versa.
And I would just say that human services are beginning to take up so much more attention and focus as we talk about city services, community services, and so to have this commission, I think would better serve the purpose than this ad hoc group that's been in place before. And then as the equity aspect of it factors into it with outreach, how's the broader community being informed about these grants, the criteria, how you apply for the deadlines, all of those kinds of things take on a much more serious note, I think, from a commission standpoint than just an ad hoc committee. And as more and more funds are coming into the city, it really becomes more important for there to be a clearly understood process and procedure for application of, dispensation of, and whether or not the recipients represent an equitable distribution of those funds in the community. So I think that option one would help the city get further along that set of objectives.
I see the point, definitely, and I would vote for that to going forward. I think it also, another making a pathway and structure so that it can continue. So.
Excellent. Thank you for your feedback. You'll be hearing from me on an ongoing basis, so we'll continue to update the progress that we make on the human services programs, any kind of different funding we receive. And as we do our needs assessment and as we do our outreach, you'll be hearing from me directly because y'all gave great input in the past about where we could do that outreach. So I just want to give you a quick update on the grant award program. So you all heard about kind of that outreach and engagement we were doing to get people to apply. The wrong mouse. So just a quick overview of the grant program, the applications we received, and then I'll go over our budget options that the work group had recommended, and then we still have to get this approved by city council. To receive 16 applications from 15 nonprofits. Our total request was over 1.1 million for a pot of 300,000. So the need was very great. The ask was much larger than what we had to distribute. We had 15 public service programs apply and 1 capital project. And that was, capital project was 1 brick and mortar project, so that was a $50,000 maximum. All applicants presented at an August 8th work group meeting, so it was wonderful. We had all 15 applicants, 5-minute presentations. We did take a recess, as you guys talked about. We took a recess because it was a long meeting, but everybody was able to talk and the committee's members were able to ask questions. We had 2 council members here, which was great. We did a notice of possible quorum. I heard you guys talk about that as well. So what they actually approved was to, this option number 2 is a score of anyone who scored 90. So they had a rubric. That was a tool to help them score the applications to, in addition to the presentations, they had a rubric, a tool that they could use. And we had a lot of different options, but we went back and forth. We talked a lot about the pros and cons, and what they determined was to make an motion and a kind of consensus, and they did take a vote to approve funding everyone who scored 90 or higher, an equal amount of 30,000. And then there's one group that we had some money left over. They didn't quite have a score of 90, but they would get the remaining dollars. So as you could see, we had North Thurston Education. I'll just quick run down who applied.
So they did vote to do that?
Yes, they did vote
Okay.
for option number 2,
Mhm.
but we haven't had it approved from the city council yet.
Okay.
I'm working on that right now. It's gonna go hopefully October 3rd. I have my staff presentation I'm working on and getting that on the agenda for October 3rd.
Mhm.
So I'll just quick run down the list of applications. We had North Thurston Education Foundation. This is in how they scored in the ranking too. Homes First, Boys and Girls Club, Community Action Council, Family Support Services, Garden Raised Bounty, South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity. Together had 2 programs, so you could apply for more than 1 program. You just had to have separate applications.
Oh.
So the same agency could apply for multiple different types of projects. Interfaith Works, Rebuilding Together, Senior Services for South Sound, Dry Tykes and Wet Wipes. Our ARC, which is a nonprofit, and Thurston County Council on Aging, the Medical Equipment Bank, and then the Capital Christian Center, which is a church right over on the other side.
Those are all 0, so they didn't.
They did not recommend for funding, so they looked at a lot of different ways, like options to fund everybody equally
Yeah.
or only fund the top scores. And the way that they determine this is a way to reach the most people
Yeah.
without leaving folks behind. So there was like a small pot of money and a lot of large asks. So one of the things at our October meeting is I'm gonna bring forth, we're gonna look at the rubric again, looking at the program policy again to see, are there things we wanna change next year? Are there things we wanna refine? Cause it was a really hard decision when you have that big of an ask
Yeah.
with that. Many.
And then do these that weren't awarded, do they get any feedback about how to make their request next time stronger or?
That's a great question. I'm willing to talk to anyone about, how to apply next year and what kind of I heard back, but I've told folks like that has to happen after the final decisions are made. So
You're right.
folks are free to contact me after the council determines the final allocations.
Mhm.
And then we can talk about next year and future application process. And they can watch any of the meetings. Again, what's great about having commissions is it's all public, it's all recorded, it's transparent. If I miss a meeting or I want to know how the decisions were made, I can go back and watch it. I believe the city has timestamps on each presentation also. So if I just want to see, different elements in the conversation, you don't have to watch the whole meeting. You can just jump to the part you want to hear.
So you received 16 applications, is
Mhm.
that the entire?
16 applications from 15 agencies.
And then they all were given time to
Present.
present.
So the one who had 2 applications got 10 minutes, 5 for each presentation.
And so did you have application where you had a score there, written and also verbal?
We didn't have a rubric for the presentations, but what I've heard from the council and from the advisory group is they really like to have, in addition to the rubric, that presentation gets them visualize it. Some people had visual presentation as well, like, slides, things like that. So it was helpful.
And Commissioner Sauer, wasn't they could use both the written and the presentation. So a lot of them had questions to help inform how they used the rubric. So it wasn't just based on only what you wrote or only what you presented that evening. It was a combination to help augment and score each organization.
How do the awards that's been recommended to be made, how do they relate to the needs assessment of the community?
That's a great question. So we started this first year with just those initial priorities, which was the basic needs, the housing, the survival, and the first year was just basic needs like housing, survival, and why am I blanking on the third one? But they're around those three basic needs that I spoke about. And then what's the goal is to go and do the needs assessment, get feedback from the community, take the data and prioritize what we're hearing. And then in the future, that will impact how we prioritize the
Mhm.
goals in the future. So if it comes back, it's housing number one, the group can recommend the city council to put more money towards housing priorities. If it comes back as basic needs like food and shelter or something like that, we could prioritize the dollars to go to that higher amount.
So that you just have to meet those three criteria, the housing, the livability, or I can't.
Housing, survival, and security.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Security.
Thank you.
I got at least
I knew
housing.
it was in there, I knew it was in there somewhere.
So, okay, so they have to relate how the grant that they're requesting is going to support that
Yes.
three. So together, for example, they have like camp for youth to come and that they livability, security and things like that. That's how it works.
Yes, and they were able to prioritize more than one. So if your agency, you might hit all three. So we kind of highlighted that for our group to say, you know, this many agencies hit the security and this many agencies hit housing. This many agencies hit survival.
And they all has to be within Lacey?
So
Serve Lacey.
So serve Lacey, and if it's a brick and mortar, it had to be located in Lacey. So if it's a project, that was a capital project, we did require it be here, but you could be a nonprofit located in a different agency, different area, but serving Lacey residents.
Which was the capital project?
It was Homes First.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
working on
first.
accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
And was it only open to nonprofits?
Yes.
So having seen that list, I see the importance of working with the Commission on Equity to make sure that, you know, the community is represented, that the BIPOC members of the community are get equal opportunity to secure these grants. A number of those organizations are great organizations. They're well-known, they're safe, and they do this, and they're able to make a great presentation and complete a very good application. Where there are others that may not have as many resources, may not have the full-time staff and the professionals to do such an excellent job of serving the community in a very, you know, effective way. But they need a little bit of support, may need a little hand up to be able to compete for these, so.
Very good point. Thank you for that comment, Commissioner. And what's nice about this group, this grant group, is that the requirements for this general funded grant are not as extensive as the federal funds. So if you are a smaller nonprofit, maybe you're just getting started, you can start with this type as a stepping stone, and then rather than like go right to the community development block grant, which has a lot more rigorous requirements.
And Commissioner, to your point, that was also a question that was raised by the work group too, and they want to go take a look at the process for future years. And that's where, again, I think there's opportunities for future discussion between the two groups. And Commissioner Jackson, to go back to the point that you brought up, I think it's a great segue into what Michelle is going to be talking about. We established these 3 areas by the council to say, hey, we don't know yet, but let's start here with basic needs. But then let's look holistically through the community and find out where the gap is. And so Michelle can talk about some of the efforts that are going in that direction. In just a second.
Okay, so that's that piece. And then we want to share our human services needs assessment. So as I spoke to you all about that community participation plan, I talked about who are the missing, we did the sticky exercise. Who are we missing? Where are the voices that we're not gonna be, we haven't heard? Took your feedback, put that in the community participation plan, and now we launched our survey. So that's live now, and that's gonna be live until October 18th. And then we are gonna be doing focus groups in the community, and so I'm gonna be reaching out to, some of you have reached out to me directly. I might be reaching out to some of you to talk about church contacts, different nonprofits that I'm not familiar with, I don't have contacts, so expect to hear from me soon about those focus groups, we wanna get those going. So now I'm gonna find my webpage. I think it's here.
I don't think that one's it.
What is that?
Do you want to stop the share first, Michelle?
Stop share. Share. There was a web page with 2
That's
tabs.
the advisory board handbook center one, just over there.
Right here?
Perfect, yep.
Okay. So we have our human services webpage and we have a link to our human services group online, human services survey online. And that needs assessment is open now.
Is it in multi-language?
We don't currently have it in multi-language, but you had offered to potentially translate. We could work on getting that done and
Okay.
working this into a couple different languages. Let me make a note on that.
And Veronica. I volunteer her.
Yeah.
So commissioners, you all have the link to the survey also in your last email that you received from me, so you can access it there in addition to where Michelle is showing you.
I took it.
Did you? Yay. I haven't been in today, but I had it open like earlier in the week to see, how many people. And we've done a press release, we've done some Facebook and Instagram pushes. I've done a constant contact push out to all my contacts. So we'll continue to kind of put pings out there in the community. I know the chamber shared it. So anything you guys can do to get it out in your communities, and we want as many people to fill it out as possible. And get a wide range of feedback. So it is surveymonkey.com and then Lacey, Lacey HS, so that's Lacey Human Services Survey. And we appreciate all your feedback to kind of help it get condense it and clear up the language. We took your feedback as well as the work group's feedback and we tweaked it so that it was easier to understand. And especially for people who are English as second language, things like that, to make it more user friendly. So yeah, please take it. You'll notice it's all very familiar.
No, we might have taken it also.
It's pretty short.
Take it again.
Um,
I'm sorry.
I wondered how, I was at the food bank today and Lacey Food Pantry would be a great place to get people to get on this survey. If there was any way
Good point.
they could, that's what the needs are. There's some
Like
huge
senior center.
human service needs going in and out those doors.
I just had a whole bunch of postcards made. And Veronica's going out with some of them to an event this week, but I could run some over there
To the pantry, yeah.
in senior services.
And I'll follow up with you it was New Life Baptist Church has quite a food pantry operation with over 300 people a month
Oh, wow.
coming through there
Yeah.
on Saturdays from 10 to 2. It's amazing. I mean, they're in
Yeah.
line waiting for the door to open.
And the flyers have a little QR, code,
code,
so you can just click it on your phone. You don't even have to know them. You don't have to go home and type in
Oh,
the.
great.
Yeah.
So if you've got some postcards that, and then this is a population that,
I can give you the ones she made for me today, and then you will get me more tomorrow. So that you can take them tonight. Would you be interested in taking some cards tonight?
sure,
Is that okay?
and we're talking about a population that wouldn't necessarily have readable access to a
Computer.
laptop or computer or iPhone or know what a QR code is. So we've got to simplify things.
So that's true too.
This,
Actually print it
this
out.
segment of our community that's,
We do have
I mean,
to,
we have a tendency to just toss things out there
Yeah.
without thinking about, you know, who's the recipient of these services? Those are the ones who need the services.
Yeah.
And they miss the message.
if there's a hard copy, they can check, but that,
I don't know, I'm just tossing it out there.
yeah.
But I just know I see that group of folk any Saturday I'm down there and it's from all over the county, all over the community. And the least of them are Black folk, people of color. So we're talking about, you know, some real needy people in our community that for whatever reason are missing the usual outlets for help. But, and, you know, there are multiple churches feeding people and food pantries, and it's not just the food bank.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, it's just really interesting. Because I noticed, this past Saturday, they've added clothes and all this kind of thing. You know, blanket drives and socks, knowing winter and fall is coming. Just some tremendous need. But they can tell us what their needs are if they had access and a way to input the input.
Or high schoolers who, you know, could take something home and discuss with their parents, or they know what some of their resources or what needs they have in their families.
Yes, and we want to definitely engage with the schools and the Thurston County Education Foundation and our youth council.
Yeah.
They'll all be part of our engagement outreach efforts. So
Yeah.
not, this is just
Yeah.
one way,
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
but it's not the only way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good, good.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and I can start translating right away as far as Korean goes, so that you have later.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. We'll be in touch this week. Okay, that was, that concludes my presentation. Are there any other questions from anyone online also?
Do you have a card? Do you have a phone number you can give me? I can follow up with you after this meeting.
So, for everybody's awareness, in the last email I sent, Michelle's contact information is included on there. So
Okay,
you can grab it
okay.
right there. And I'm happy to send it out too in another email. so you
No,
have
that's
it
good.
As well.
That's good.
Yep.
I remember seeing it now that I asked. Yeah.
Thank you.
We appreciate, again, getting that survey out in multiple ways, and we'll get you all copies of the flyers and we'll have some
I
available.
was gonna bring a stack,
too.
but I wasn't sure if I give one to the clerk for the record, then can I bring a stack in?
Yep.
Should I go grab a stack?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, I'll be right back.
Can I have the mouse while you're headed that way?
Yes, I have too many mouses and too many phones.
Yes, you do. Mouse, mice.
Nice.
So our next item of business is the equity index map discussion.
All right, commissioners, this was a topic that we had discussed a couple of months ago, and we're ready to bring it back now with a little bit more detail and hopefully get some direction from you all. So just as a kind of a quick reminder, and this is all included as part of your staff report, we have been taking a look at the maps that are out there. We think that this is going to cost around $40,000 to start before we had kind of a broad range of 25 to 45, and we think it's gonna be around 40,000. And that annual maintenance costs are gonna be around $12,000 per year.
So I'm not sure what equity index map will cost.
Yeah,
What's equity index map?
we'll go into that in just a second. Yep, yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's been a while since we've talked about it, so. We'll go over that here in just a bit. So we did have a introduction back in May when we talked briefly about this, and then previously in the last year, we talked broadly about tools that could be available. And this was a subset of tools. And when we were talking about, creating an equity tool in the future, we were saying how good it would be to have this as something that could help inform tools that were filled out for, say, like policy or budget decisions. This is identified in the work plan as starting to research and then continuing to research. So here we are coming back with a little bit more the update. And it fits really well with the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging strategic plan.
I love that you put those in there.
Yep.
Just perfect.
Great. So under programs, policies and services, specifically for city policies, about integrating and reflecting equity values in all policies and planning documents. And specifically implementing a equity framework tool to help guide policy and programming decisions to enhance equitable services. Increasingly use this tool to inform policy and budgetary decisions. So to your question, a little background on what, again, are equity maps and equity index maps. So an equity tool is something that allows for a decision-making model with equitable considerations into thinking how we look at new proposals, policies, processes, procedures, practices, and to try to systematically examine how different communities could be impacted by a proposed action or decision. We talked about, including things like consideration of impacts on social identities, groups, or categories, focusing on an emphasis on what is the data and what does the data say, and then also encouraging, community engagement and involvement. In our last review, there were several Washington jurisdictions that we took a look at what their equity maps looked like. We also took a look at several non-Washington jurisdictions, including, Alexandria, Virginia as an example, and San Antonio, Texas as another example. So to the question of what are equity maps, the idea is that you take a bunch of different categories and indexes and you create a really digestible way to see how that information interplays with each other. So the city of Tacoma's equity map, you can see right here, where it has all of the census tracts within Tacoma. And there are certain indices that are decided for livability, accessibility, environment, education, and environmental health. And collectively, all of these indices that are included within each of these categories, there is an overall equity overview. So what is the score for this particular track right here? And you can see with this track right here that's selected that the equity index is high. And then it gives you a little bit more information on an overview based on here, the entire city, but as you select the tracks on those tracks specifically. So if you were to toggle to economy, for example, this map would look totally different. And then you could select an individual track and you could see exactly what their indicators are and what it looks like in that track. It doesn't get smaller than that though. These are the kind of the smallest like block census data that is available for us to use. Very similarly, Pierce County put one together. The concept is very same. The organizations that actually put these maps together are the same organization. The Port of Seattle has a similar one. You can see they've had some additional overlays on their maps to show some of their funding categories. So this is something in the future where we're looking at programs. Maybe it's human services and where people are getting recipients to services. Maybe that's a future layer that gets incorporated so that people can see that. But the idea is that you can take the information and you can take the data and you can present it and make more data-driven decisions with how your policies and your funding and programs are produced. And
I can see why it's $12,000 maintenance, because all those things change
Update,
each
yeah.
year and they have to pull
Updated.
it back in.
yeah, so for each one of these, it's pulling from a different data set. And in addition to that, they have, again, how they've set up their weights on the different indices. They've got to kind of do that recalculation for updates. Just up to the north on I-5, you can see Lakewood also has one. Where I think they're very similar to the size of Lacey. We're both around 64,000 individuals here, and you can toggle through and you can see the categories.
So the color variation is showing the better better, I don't know what you might call it, the ratio that they are better than others?
You
Lighter
see the
means
color
less?
code, see the color code?
High,
Kim?
okay, high, medium, okay,
yeah,
okay, I get it,
yeah.
okay.
So
In
Yeah,
that category. Mhm.
and these are all things like as far as the color coding and what that looks like that, you know, organizations can work through. And you can see like Pierce County, for example, use blue because red may have a different connotation for different people. And so that's certainly something that, you know, can be considered as we're talking about it. But the idea being that this block grant comparative to say this one or this one, you know, they are scoring higher in some of the equity indicators. So, you know, for example, they may have more access to internet, they may have more access to cars, home ownership rates may be higher in those areas where they may be less in these areas. And so it's again, a very visual way to showcase that data combined.
oh, I remember this looking, actually went home and looked at it too, so.
Yep. And you all, as part of the staff report, have the links, so you can go on and you can, you know, play around with all of these and see how they work and interact with each other. And then the ones from out of state, again, you could access in the last staff report. One thing we did highlight is that indicators vary between equity maps, what's included and how they kind of put together what the equity scores are. And really comes down to some preferences, but it also comes down to what data is available in different jurisdictions. For example, you know, we were looking at a couple of maps where it was talking very specifically about code compliance issues. And so whether or not an organization has that data set could look very different organization to organization. Whereas census data is going to look very uniform across all of the jurisdictions. So there are some elements where we'll have to check to see if we have data availability, and then design it, you know, based on maybe some things that we're taking into account. And I'll use the example again, just of like the color even is something we'll wanna consider as we're developing it.
So you pretty much decide what you like to look at, what kind of data that you need or you wanna keep. So I'm just wondering, so each jurisdiction or each owner is determining what they wanna look at, what they wanna maintain.
To a certain extent, yes, yeah, absolutely. But you know, in the last staff report that we took a look at, we compared the Tacoma indexes with Pierce counties. And I would say probably 90% of them were the same, and that's because a lot of them are pulling from data sources that are uniform. What we're here tonight is we've got kind of a list of what we, you know, think could be possible, pending some availability. There are a few things that we need to take a look at, and there is another layer that we're looking to see if we can add. And that's specifically home ownership rates by race, of having that be a layer that people can toggle on to see in addition to some of these indicators. So in your staff report, you've got our kind of draft equity index components. And I've put up a couple of them here with accessibility and economy. And then there's also education, environmental, livability, and then just the general overview. And so what I was hoping to get some feedback from the commission on tonight is, are there things that we may be missing in here that we should take a look into? And to the best degree, we'll see if that is a possibility. And I can go category by category if it helps, or if you all just want to have a broad discussion on it.
So do we have like you know, business possibility of having successful business? Is it under economy? Okay, you have it there. Anything to do with business, like?
You know, the closest thing we have is poverty rate and unemployment rate on business specifically. I don't think it speaks to, Commissioner, what you're looking for of like how successful is a business.
Or even
About
even
BIPOC
number of
businesses.
businesses or the category of businesses, or I'm just wondering.
I think on the question, to answer yours first, if you recall, when we were looking at the data that we had available for this, specifically from the census, they hadn't updated it since 2017. And so it was fairly out of date. And then the question too would be of how granular you can get it.
To get it, how to get them. Yeah, you have to get the data.
But
Is there any way, once the map is done, the whole issue of racially restricted covenants on property and redlining practices by banks and other financial institutions that directed certain groups of people to certain neighborhoods based on these things. I was just trying to figure out these different categories. It's not livability, it's maybe accessibility, I don't know.
Hmm.
But if we were to flash up
History.
Lacey and its environs, and here's a, you know, a big cluster of African American. I know it looked like how Lacey came in, where black folks out here, Olympia, water and counter laws and all that. Inequity, housing, and home ownership, that something like that might come up. I don't know. It's on the economy, home ownership rate.
We could have it by race.
Commissioner, I do know that data set exists, right? So you
Yep.
can go to the University of Washington and you can see where they have compiled so far, where all the racially restrictive and
Mhm.
ethnically restrictive covenants are.
And Thurston County Auditor's
We
Office.
still have that, by
Thurston
the
County
way?
Auditor's
Uh-huh.
Office. Yep. And so they're not legally binding at this point in
Right,
time, but they
right.
do exist. And the Auditor's Office does have a program that is available so that you can take them off of your deed.
And it's still a large number of properties still with those covenants that they did not take advantage of the free service that allowed them to attach an addendum as a current property owner. They're still on the books. And I don't know how much of it might still be affecting, you know, real estate practices, redlining, lending practices, and the place is growing so fast. There's a huge equity issue with that kind. It's historical. But you know, to see something pulsating like a red neon light for something, you know, Houston, we have a problem, you know, kind of thing. So this kind of mapping would help that kind of thing. And it's not all historical. A lot of those practices are still in existence, but people don't want to talk about it.
So we can certainly look at what the
I don't know.
possibility for a layer like that. I will say, and to Commissioner Jackson's point, that when they looked at jurisdictions in Thurston County, very few of those covenants existed in Lacey.
Right,
It was in the surrounding areas. And
that's
with-
right.
With this map specifically, we'd be focusing on Lacey, Lacey's urban growth area. So it wouldn't necessarily paint the whole picture of the rest of the area. It
I
would
got
just
you. I
be-
see what, yeah, I know what
Yeah.
you're saying. But there's a story to be told, you know, and I think in terms of Thurston County and some of these county jurisdictional kind of efforts underway. So there's a micro picture and there's a big picture. And there's some explanation as to why the micro picture exists.
Mhm.
You know, Lacey wasn't an incorporated municipality till 69. And a lot of these things go back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and still on the books. I don't know how it can be tracked and layered, but
And maybe if we had that layer, then if Thurston County was building an equity map or Olympia was building an equity map, they might
I don't know.
also be encouraged to include it.
But the whole issue of data availability, you know, it determines everything. If
Yeah.
you can't find the data, you can't overlay nothing. Yeah.
Can we consider military or veterans or something along that line? If you're active duty military, veterans, retired, veterans or home ownership or something like that to time together.
I think veterans is obviously the easiest thing for us to track because the census does track it. And so getting that data is really easy.
It's a good percentage.
Active duty
Yeah.
can
No,
be done
in and out.
by zip code, to my knowledge, and I don't know beyond that. but that isn't gonna paint a very accurate picture because our zip codes.
Yeah, and then move it
Yeah,
around.
and it changes so quickly.
Yeah, because we have a significant population, so to have, so is it 9%, 15%? Yeah, would be interesting.
Yeah.
Um, what about medical access? I see food access. I'm not sure if that means like, grocery store or any of that, but when you think of food deserts, you also need to think of medical deserts too.
Yeah, Commissioner Hart, that's a good point. And also food access,
I'm sorry?
groceries, full grocery access.
Yeah, so, we have, medical access, like she said, I think that's a good. Oh, health. Yeah, okay.
So we do have under livability here, you can see health uninsured rate.
Mm, but I don't think you have to have, is that talking more about the insurance having it? I mean, that and having access to medical is two different things.
Yeah, I think though it could be a difficult, you can certainly take a look into it, but your point, having insurance is certainly one part of the equation, but then also who your provider is, and it's really hard to track if somebody's provider is the nearest hospital or medical center, but they don't have access to that. Provider.
Yeah, if they have to go like further out, like maybe they're going, maybe it might be somebody who is a military person, but they've got to go out to Madigan as opposed to the South Clinic here in Lacey or Providence.
Yeah.
It's a great start and,
Yeah.
our first swipe at it will be very informative. Uh, you talking about healthcare. Who are the people that's showing up in the emergency room that don't have primary care providers? What's the racial breakdown, the economic break, and it's not all economic. It's just, it's access.
Yeah, and sometimes it's having the providers, we may not have enough providers in this area.
The urgent care centers, who are the? But the healthcare will get at that. So it's more than the insured, who's insured or uninsured. A lot of these people are insured and just can't find a provider and show up in the emergency room.
So I have a question regarding education. I'm just curious as to why we stopped at high school graduation. So for the business community, those with associate's degrees, technical degrees, 4-year degrees is important. So I'm just wondering, higher ed, higher than post-high school or something along that line. So that's good information for employers to know what the base is.
I think that one is a data set that exists clearly through the US Census, and so I certainly think that's a possibility of incorporating. I would have to imagine with high school too, part of that is the education data with the state that exists, right? So that's readily available and you can get that information. So that's part of it. So having the two data sources, I think, could be helpful to painting a broader picture. I do wanna, go back to Commissioner Jackson's comment of, this is also our first swing, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Big
think,
list.
there's always gonna be possibilities to revise this and
course.
consider other things. And as more data becomes available, especially in like the public realm, that we can do additions in the future.
Great.
I appreciate the comments and we'll take a look into several of the things you all brought up.
When do we think we might be taking our first swipe at our equity map?
Yeah, well, I think, we are moving along and I'm hoping that we can be well into the development in the next couple of months. I would say, hopefully,
fast.
we could come back to this group
Great.
at Q1 with something to show.
Super.
Great. Well, we don't have a lot of time, so let's go through things sort of quickly. Commissioners' reports. I just I have one little thing. Well, I would like to recognize it's Hispanic Heritage Month and encouraging people to go and experience some of the events that we have in our community and in Thurston County. I also would like to recognize Shannon Kelly Fong, who was received the Outstanding Assistant Award.
Yay, congratulations.
Let's see, where's my little note? Yes, from the Washington City and County Managers Association.
Oh, wow.
So our city manager, Rick Walk, nominated Shannon for her professionalism, value-driven leadership, and he points to specific work on the council plan, the city policy manual, our COE work, and he gave her special recognition for helping him in his transition from into city manager. So it is quite an honor and an honor to have you as our person here.
Well deserved, well deserved.
Congratulations.
Then John, are you with us? Would you like to give us a brief one on the Parks Improvement Funding Group? Are you there? Well, I know he wasn't feeling particularly good today. Might have to postpone that till our next meeting. So the director report.
Before you move to directive
Oh,
report.
yes, and the other commissioners.
I was made aware of a survey that the Olympia Equity Group just completed.
Commission.
And there are a lot of implications for places like Lacey and the surrounding areas. So it was an excellent report. About an $80,000 report they paid for, and it's been finished and whatever. If we can get access to that, as we're talking about our equity index map and what could we glean from it that might be of some help to us. It did go beyond City of Olympia, but they surveyed quite a few people, and formally presented the report. But I haven't been able to track it down and get a hold of it, but it sounded like it could have some utility for us.
Absolutely.
Any other commissioner? Shannon.
All right, commissioners, the only item I have on my report is just kind of give you an update on the next couple of months and what to expect for the calendar. So this is going to be a pretty brief presentation, and since I only have 15 minutes, I won't take all of it. But just really quickly, just wanted to review the work plan with you all. We've been working our way through this. As you can see with Q1 this year, we have gotten through most of the items. There's a couple items here that are still in progress. One of them that we talked about today. As far as the paid community liaison program, I want to let you all know this hasn't fallen off the radar. We just had a couple of other projects come up. And so we hope to circle back to this group here pretty soon with a recommendation for you all to consider. You can see going to Q2, we have a lot of other items too that we've completed and that we're continuing to do in progress, the two that I mentioned. And then a few that are not started right now as we're just balancing these meetings and a couple of other priorities here at the city. And so they're still on the docket and they're something that we want to come back to this group. One of the items here, I'll just highlight the review of community survey options. We are, as part of this, we've got some pretty good direction from the strategic plan. And we're also kind of waiting for timing with the Parks Improvement Funding Work Group and their product. Because one of the things we'd like to couple is if there's any questions as a result of that product that they want to ask the community, we'll have the bandwidth and space to do that jointly with some of the community feedback we're looking for. So I'm hoping that will come before you all in early 2025 for discussion. The Parks Improvement Funding Work Group is tentatively scheduled to make their recommendations to the city council at the end of this year. And so that could lead again to coupling whatever that recommendation is or direction from the city council based off of their work for future consideration as part of that. As we're here in Q3 right now, you can see we've got some in progress groups and then some completed items. The one we celebrated today was the adoption of the strategic plan. So we'll continue to work on those and then we're gonna be entering in Q4. And so we have a lot less items here done at this point. Looking to October, what we're hoping to have come before the commission is a presentation from the Black Home Initiative, learning more about that. Having an update from our Community and Economic Development Department on housing updates connected to the Black Home Initiative. And specifically talking about the Covenant Home Ownership Act, which I provided you all a little bit of information a couple of emails ago, but we can go into that. And that ties directly into the conversation we were just having about, racially restricted covenants here in Washington State. And then we're also planning to have the Lacey Police Department come. So they were tentatively scheduled for this meeting, but unfortunately due to some scheduling issues, we are having to bump them to October. So they'll be here to answer. I know the group had some questions on the community resource unit, the mobile outreach team, and the 30x30 initiative.
On that, are some of the members of the resource unit coming, or is this a report from chief or
Yeah.
deputy chief?
Good question. I know at this point, one of the chief or deputy chief will be there in addition to the lieutenant who oversees the CRU.
Okay.
But I think what you're asking is, are members of the mobile outreach team going to be
Yeah.
there? And I can confirm if
It's
that's.
just nice to, get the, on the ground kind of.
Sure. And I will say, the CRU team works day in and day out with the mobile outreach team, but I can still figure out if they have the possibility to bring
Could offer them.
a representative. And then we'll have an update on equity activities in the city. And then finally, we'll keep talking about our park improvement funding work group update, which just to talk a little bit about that, the work group has been overviewing the park system, what's in it, what's the need within the comprehensive plan that identified, $60+ million of projects over the next couple of years. And now over the next couple of sessions, they're gonna be focused on what are some funding tools that might be available for moving forward. So those discussions will continue here in a couple of days. So that is the plan moving forward, and then just kind of thinking future items. We will also need to touch on I can't believe I'm saying this, the 2025 work plan. We'll need to create that, and then like I said, we'll keep on these three items, and then bringing back more information on a future community forum, a summit that we're starting to have some planning go into, and then also some possibilities for joint meetings with the Commission on Equity and the Lacey Youth Council, and then some possibilities maybe of even some other bodies too meeting jointly with the Commission on Equity in the future. So I just wanted to give you all just kind of a heads up of what we're
Shannon.
planning. Yeah.
Can you say a little more about that DEIB summit?
Yeah.
What is that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we have been talking about with some regional partners is there a possibility? We've been working with the League of Women Voters every spring, and we've been having the panel on what are the jurisdictions doing? And I really, I'm very thankful for the league of taking the lead on putting those together. And one of the conversations we've been having with the league and other partners is, can we build off of that? Where we get the opportunity to interact and we get to hear from not just government, but maybe we hear from, individuals and organizations in the nonprofit world, in the for-profit world, in the education, and getting people together in like a day where there's panels, there's workshops, and there's possibility for looking at regional initiatives as well. So we're in the kind of infant stage of it where we've been having some discussions, but we're hoping that maybe we can build off of the success of the League of Women Voters and collaborating with them and other community stakeholders in bringing something for the whole community jointly with other organizations.
I'll follow with you more offline, because I have a question about this entity called the Thurston County Equity Council, who came and presented to us last month. And I didn't leave with a clear understanding of their relationship to us as an equity commission. So when I saw DEIB Summit up there, that's what clicked in my head, because I work with the League of Women Voters as a member. And I've been pushing them to be this nonpartisan convener of all this effort going on. So out of the clear blue popped up this Equity Council last meeting. Who are they? What do they do? Where do we fit as an equity commission? Kind of things. But I can continue that conversation with you in lieu of the lateness of the hour. But when I saw the summit listed up there, wonder what that has to do with this other stuff
Yeah.
that seems to be going on external to equity commissions and equity, whatever other folk are calling themselves. I'll talk to you.
Yeah,
I'll
no,
follow up.
absolutely. And, you know, we've also had some just kind of initial discussions with that coalition as well of like, hey, can we continue to have these as we're looking forward in the future? So I think there is a lot of room for conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And that's my report, Chair.
Okay, if there are no other items on the agenda, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you for coming. You.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
7 minutes left. All right.
Yes, 8:23.